Motorcycles have always danced on the edge of innovation and insanity. Some features pushed the envelope, others torched it and launched it out of a high-revving exhaust. But in a world filled with safety regulations, emissions crackdowns, and bureaucrats who think fun should come with a warning label, not everything makes it past the finish line. So here we go. 12 real motorcycle features that actually got banned. Not just discouraged or regulated, banned. Because apparently, launching fireballs, defying gravity, or watching cartoons on your dash while doing 120 just doesn't fly with lawmakers. Number 1. 2-step and 3-step rev limiters. Race-style launch control. Ever heard a bike at the track spitting fire and sounding like it's declaring war on the atmosphere? That's a 2-step or 3-step rev limiter. Originally used in racing, these systems allow the rider to hold the throttle wide open at a set RPM while launching, dumping unburned fuel into the exhaust. When it ignites, it sounds like a machine gun and helps build boost or maintain engine speed for flawless drag launches. Sounds awesome, right? Yeah. Until regulators showed up with clipboards and noise meters. In countries like Germany, Australia, and parts of the US, these systems started getting banned for street use. The reason? Noise violations, environmental impact, and general public disturbance. Even though the feature doesn't make a bike faster in normal use, the sheer drama of the noise, especially from modified exhausts, was enough to trigger restrictions. Some emissions authorities also flagged them for bypassing fuel cut standards, meaning you could fail an inspection just for having one installed. And don't think the aftermarket's safe either. In California, having a tunable ECU with a 2-step mode can get you slapped with a hefty fine. Even race teams now have to toe the line on where and how these features are deployed. So, while it might make your launch feel like a Fast and Furious moment, using it on the street can be the fastest way to get your bike impounded. Thanks, science, and neighbors with sensitive ears. Number 2. Wheelie control defeat switches. Remember when sport bikes let you turn off all the rider aids with one glorious button? Just a flick and wheelie control was gone, allowing full power to the front and chaos to your neighbor's flower beds. Well, those days are mostly over, at least if you live in Europe or any place that's allergic to fun. Regulators, especially in the EU, started cracking down on the ability to fully disable certain electronic safety features. Wheelie control was one of the first in the crosshairs. Why? Because it encouraged behavior that governments labeled as reckless, aka putting the front wheel in the air just because traffic sucks. Manufacturers didn't want the heat, so newer bikes started making these systems harder to defeat. Some remove the option altogether, unless you're in a track mode that's buried in a submenu. Others require dealer-level tools to deactivate it, and in many markets, a road-legal bike simply cannot be sold with a full defeat switch accessible to the rider. It's not just about stunting, it's about liability. If you crash while wheelie control was off, especially if it was an OEM feature, you could potentially drag the manufacturer into legal trouble. So now they're playing it safe, and so are you, whether you like it or not. Of course, the track still lets you do whatever you want, but on the street, you're stuck with training wheels. Electronic ones, you're not allowed to remove. Number 3. Variable exhaust valves without emissions compliance. Once upon a time, exhaust valve systems like Yamaha's EXUP were a clever way to cheat the rules without technically breaking them. They used a butterfly valve in the exhaust to boost low-end torque and reduce noise at lower RPMs, just enough to sneak past emissions and sound tests. Above a certain speed or throttle input, the valve opened wide, unleashing full performance. The result? Quiet at test time, savage on the street. Regulators eventually caught on. In the mid-2000s, emissions agencies, especially in Europe and California, started enforcing durability standards that didn't just check emissions once, but repeatedly across the bike's lifetime. Suddenly, these clever variable valves had to prove they could keep working, cleanly and quietly, for tens of thousands of miles. Many couldn't. Manufacturers either had to redesign them with expensive materials and sensors, or pull them entirely from their road models. Yamaha, Suzuki, Honda all had bikes that quietly lost their variable exhaust tech in newer versions. Some still use them, but now they're locked down and fully emissions compliant, which often kills the original performance advantage. And forget trying to install one aftermarket. Non-certified systems can make your bike fail inspection or void your registration entirely depending on where you live. It's one of those classic cases where innovation pushed too hard, regulators push back, and what used to be a brilliant little cheat code is now just another forbidden fruit of motorcycle tech. Number 4. Off-throttle fuel cut delete, aka deceleration enrichment maps. This one was a favorite among tuners and track junkies until the emissions police came knocking. By default, modern fuel-injected bikes cut fuel entirely when you roll off the throttle. It's great for emissions, but terrible for smoothness. The sudden fuel cutoff can make the bike lurch or feel twitchy during engine braking, especially in aggressive riding. So what'd the tuners do? They started using deceleration enrichment maps, fueling strategies that kept a bit of fuel flowing even when you're off throttle. The result? Silky smooth transitions, better rear-wheel traction, and fewer surprises mid-corner. It also made some bikes pop and burble on decel, which riders loved. But emissions regulators didn't. Those pops weren't just noise, they were unburned fuel hitting the exhaust, raising hydrocarbon emissions way above legal limits. Agencies like CARB, the California Air Resources Board, and EU regulators caught wind of this trick and started cracking down hard. Now, any road-legal bike must have strict off-throttle fuel cut strategies baked into the ECU. Manufacturers had to lock down their maps, and aftermarket tuning that disables fuel cut can make your bike illegal for street use in many regions. Some tuning shops even got fined. Track bikes can still play with it, assuming they never touch public roads. But for your average rider who just wanted smoother throttle and a little pop-pop from the exhaust, that secret sauce is now officially off the menu. Number 5. Two-stroke oil injection systems on road bikes. Back in the heyday of two-stroke road bikes, oil injection systems were seen as a brilliant innovation. Instead of pre-mixing oil with gas like a lawnmower, these systems used a separate oil tank and pumped just the right amount of lubricant into the engine automatically. It made riding simpler, cleaner, at the time, and gave bikes like the Yamaha RD350 and Suzuki RGV250 their edge. Easy power, lightweight, and that signature two-stroke scream. But the thing is, two-stroke combustion is dirty. Even with injection, you're still burning oil with every stroke. As emissions regulations tightened, especially in Europe and California, the whole system came under fire, not just because it was inefficient, but because it was practically impossible to make it comply with modern pollution standards. It wasn't just the exhaust gases. Regulators started testing long-term emissions durability, looking at how systems performed after thousands of miles. Oil injection setups often degraded or leaked over time, leading to inconsistent performance and even worse emissions. By the early 2000s, most manufacturers pulled two-stroke oil-injected road bikes from the market altogether. Today, you can only find them on off-road or race bikes, and even those are vanishing fast. What once was a symbol of two-stroke convenience is now a relic. Not because it didn't work, but because the air we breathe finally got a vote. Number 6. Adjustable ride height system, hydraulic or electronic. In theory, adjustable ride height sounds like genius. Lower the bike for better aerodynamics on the straights, raise it back up for cornering stability. Ducati even tested it on MotoGP machines. And some wild customs and drag bikes brought hydraulic setups to the street just for show, or for low-slung launches at the strip. But on real-world roads, this feature caused panic among regulators. The problem? Mid-ride geometry changes are unpredictable. If a system fails, lags, or misjudges a bump, you could suddenly lose front-end feel, steepen the rake too much, or bottom out mid-turn. It's not just about clearance, it's about physics messing with your front tire's relationship to the road. Riders started reporting tank slappers and twitchy corner exits, especially on early systems that didn't sync well with suspension damping. Governments stepped in fast. Countries like Germany, the UK, and Australia slapped restrictions on electronic or hydraulic ride height adjustment for road use. The safety risk wasn't theoretical, it was measurable. Unintended changes to chassis geometry mid-ride were just too risky to allow. So, while racers get to enjoy their active suspensions and preload trickery, for road bikes, adjustable ride height systems are now mostly banned, unless they meet absurdly strict safety and durability requirements, which they usually don't. It's one of those too clever for its own good ideas that never made it past the lab coat stage for most street riders. Number 7. Speed-sensitive windshield systems, like BMW's early concepts. Back in the 2000s, BMW and a few other manufacturers played with the idea of windshields that automatically adjusted based on your speed. At first glance, it sounded like the future. Higher windscreen at highway speeds for comfort, lower at low speeds for visibility. One less thing for the rider to fiddle with. What could go wrong? Well, quite a bit. These systems were often motorized and programmed to raise or lower the screen depending on how fast you were going. But speed isn't the only factor in wind resistance. Crosswinds, sudden gusts, and rider position all play a role. More than one tester reported situations where the windscreen shot up just as a strong gust hit, blocking peripheral vision or wobbling the bars. Others had the screen suddenly drop mid-ride, disrupting airflow and causing helmet buffeting bad enough to feel like a slap in the face. And here's the kicker. Once regulators realized these moving parts could interfere with visibility or distract riders mid-corner, they got banned. Countries like Germany and Japan outlawed speed-sensitive windshield systems that didn't include full manual overrides or pass strict visibility compliance under sudden movement conditions. Today, electronically adjustable windshields still exist, but they're slow-moving and require the rider to manually adjust them. The smart auto-changing ones? Dead and buried. It's a classic example of a high-tech solution that forgot the low-tech reality. Not surprises, especially at 80 miles an hour. Number 8. Throttle by wire without redundant failsafe. Before 2007, some early throttle-by-wire systems were rushed to market without what's now considered a critical safety feature: redundant failsafes. The idea was revolutionary. Replace the traditional throttle cable with sensors and servos for smoother power delivery, ride modes, and advanced electronics. It worked until it didn't. The problem, without a backup system, if the primary throttle sensor failed, the bike could do one of two things: nothing, or worse, everything. There were rare but terrifying reports of bikes stuck at wide open throttle or suddenly losing power mid-pass. And when it comes to motorcycles, even a single glitch can be fatal. Regulators in the EU, Japan, and the US took notice. Standards were quickly updated, requiring that any ride-by-wire system include redundant sensors, circuit isolation, and fail-safe protocols. If one sensor fails, the system has to shut down gracefully or revert to a limp mode, not launch you into orbit. These changes didn't just apply to future designs. Some older models with primitive throttle-by-wire systems were pulled from sale or had to undergo factory retrofits to comply. Any aftermarket piggyback modules that interfered with throttle signals, banned or heavily restricted in multiple regions. Modern TBW systems are now incredibly refined, but they owe their safety and legality to a hard lesson. Never give a computer full control without a plan B, especially when that computer controls a 150 horsepower rocket with 2 wheels. Number 9. Integrated rear brake turn signal combos. It sounds clever on paper. Instead of cluttering up the tail of the bike with multiple lights, why not combine your brake lights and turn signals into one sleek LED unit? That's exactly what Honda and a few boutique builders tried in the early 2000s, especially on concept bikes and limited production models. The goal was cleaner aesthetics and fewer parts. Riders loved the minimalist look, regulators not so much. The issue came down to one word: clarity. In many jurisdictions, especially across the US and European Union, vehicle lighting laws are extremely specific. Brake lights must be red, centered, and bright enough to be seen in daylight. Turn signals must be amber, or sometimes red, spaced a certain distance apart, and must flash at a clearly defined rate. When these signals were combined into a single housing, even with smart logic and different light patterns, they often failed visibility and reaction time tests. In practice, it was easy for other drivers to get confused. Was that a brake, a turn, both? The time it takes to figure that out is sometimes the time it takes to crash into the back of a bike. Because of this ambiguity, several countries issued blanket bans on shared function taillights unless they could pass strict visibility and angle standards. Most didn't. Today, this combo setup is either illegal by default or requires special approval that few manufacturers bother applying for. It's a case where form clashed with function and lost. Number 10. Quick shifters without gear position sensing. Back in the early days of quick shifter tech, the idea was simple. Cut ignition for a fraction of a second when you tap the shift lever, and voila, clutchless upshifts without rolling off the throttle. It felt like MotoGP magic for the street, but the early systems had a serious flaw. They didn't know what gear you were in at all. These primitive setups relied purely on RPM and shift lever input, meaning they could cut power even during false neutrals, mismatched shifts, or accidental taps. Riders reported jerky shifts, engine over revs, and occasional mid-corner hiccups that could destabilize the bike. One unlucky shift while leaned over at speed, and you'd feel that rear tire step out. Not ideal. It didn't take long for regulators, especially in Europe and Japan, to start raising eyebrows. A system that alters ignition timing and fuel delivery without knowing your gear? That's a liability waiting to happen. And so, rules were put in place. Any quick shifter installed on a road-legal motorcycle now needs to have integrated gear position sensing. This lets the ECU fine-tune timing, manage engine load, and prevent misfires or dangerous cutouts. Most modern bikes now have a sophisticated sensor suite that makes quick shifting buttery smooth. But those older kits you see online? Many of them are technically illegal to install on a road-going motorcycle, especially in countries with strict type approval systems. It's one of those mods that aged poorly and quietly got banned for everyone's safety. Number 11. Removable speed limiters. Lamb's Euro A2 bikes. Once upon a time, if you were a new rider in places like Australia or Europe, you could walk into a dealership, buy a full-powered 600cc bike with a learner legal speed limiter installed, and remove it the moment you got home. Voila! Instant superbike. These limiters were mechanical, often throttle stops or ECU restrictors, and they were never really meant to last. Manufacturers looked the other way. So did a lot of governments. It was the worst-kept secret in motorcycling. But as accidents piled up and licensing loopholes became a joke, regulators cracked down. The learner-approved motorcycle schemes, LAMs in Australia, A2 license in the EU, were meant to protect novice riders, not to give them a cheat code to full performance. So, rules changed. If a bike is sold as restricted, that limiter now has to be tamper-proof, permanently welded, factory-locked, or hard-coded into the ECU. If it's removable, the bike can't be legally classified under the learner category. Manufacturers had to adjust quickly. Some pulled certain models from LAM's lists entirely. Others developed bikes specifically for these markets with smaller engines or permanently restricted tuning. Today, trying to de-restrict a learner bike not only voids your insurance, it can get your license yanked if you're caught. In many countries, cops can now plug into your ECU roadside and check your map. The freedom days are over. If you're on a learner license now, you're stuck with what you buy, at least until you graduate. Number 12. Transparent fuel tanks, fuel sight panels. They looked cool. They were clever. They let you see exactly how much gas was sloshing around without needing a gauge. But transparent fuel tanks and sight panels, those little windows or clear sections some bikes once proudly showed off, ended up getting banned in multiple countries, and for some pretty boring but important reasons. The first issue? UV degradation. Many of these transparent plastics didn't age well. Sunlight would slowly cook the material, turning it brittle, cloudy, or even yellow. That meant you could go from a sleek custom tank to a cracked, leaking hazard without much warning. Not great when you're riding something that could burst into flames. Then came flammability concerns. In places like Germany and the UK, strict fuel system regulations kicked in. Tanks had to meet specific tests for impact resistance, vapor sealing, and fire safety. Transparent plastics just didn't pass. Even if the bike wasn't leaking, the potential for damage in a crash made regulators uneasy. A scratched window? Possible weak point. A tank made of see-through plastic? One spark away from a campfire. And then there was the manufacturing inconsistency. Without a standardized material or testing protocol, different bikes had wildly different results. Some sight windows fogged up, others leaked. Some tanks warped in heat. Eventually, most transparent designs were scrapped or regulated to the track, where regulations are looser, and nobody cares if your tank looks like a water bottle. For street bikes, solid, painted, boring metal won the war. Bikes used to be wild, sometimes too wild. From roaring two-strokes that smoked out entire neighborhoods to clever gadgets that bent the rules just a little too far, Motorcycle history is filled with innovations that crossed the line and got smacked down by lawmakers. Sometimes it was about safety, sometimes emissions, and sometimes it was just because a few riders couldn't resist turning a feature into a liability. So, which of these banned features would you bring back if you could? And which ones do you think deserve to disappear forever? Let me know in the comments. And if you're still riding with a few unofficial mods, well, I won't tell if you don't.